Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first workshop for the 3D printer workshop series. Today, we're going to be talking about parts of a 3D printer. So let's get started. What is 3D printing? So let's start off with what is 3D printing in general, and then we'll go for what constitutes a 3D printer. So 3D printing is basically a layering process where layers are deposited on top of each other. And this may be analogous to some sort of 2D printing. So I'm sure you guys heard of 2D printing and 3D printing. So in a regular printer, it prints from X to Y. Just looks at the X and Y axes in a regular ink printer, but in 3D printing, it looks at the X and Y as well as the Z axis when it starts to 3D print some sort of object. The definition is 3D printing is the process of making a physical object from a digital file by additively layering material. And there are two different types of 3D printers that you may see when you're buying one is FFF versus FDM. Fused filament fabric versus the fused deposition modeling. And the only difference, there's no difference between these two. The only reason they have different names is more of a legal matter because I think FDM is specific to a very specific type of company. And so when you ever see these, you can basically disregard them. They both use filament, which is a part of a 3D printer, which we'll discuss a little bit later. And in this workshop series, we're going to be using three main printers, the Ender 3, Ender 3 Pro, and Ender 5 Pro. These are all printers by Creality, so do check them out. So we have, this is the Ender 3, this is the Ender 3 Pro, and this is the Ender 5 Pro. These are all at my house right here, right beside me. And these are the printers we're going to be using for this entire workshop series, as well as this workshop. So the first part of a 3D printer I want to talk about is the actual material. Filament is the 3D printer material we will be working with. It's basically plastic. The most common form of filament is known as PLA. Most people think that PLA is biodegradable. It is not biodegradable under normal circumstances. So, for example, if you throw it in the trash, it's not biodegradable. In certain conditions, like if you heat up PLA to a certain amount, then the molecules start to break off and then it becomes biodegradable. But really, it's not. There are other different common filament. For example, there's resin, carbon fiber, nylon, and if you use different materials, all these different materials have different purposes. For example, some are heat resistant, others are for UV resistance, some have high strength, a low friction or elasticity. For example, the carbon fiber one, I think, has a high strength um, attribute to it. And so if you're building like, for example, a racing drone or something, then you could use the carbon fiber one because it has high strength and a low weight to it. Um, the ones rolls that you see here are 1,000 grams, 1 kilogram of PLA. Sometimes they come in smaller ones from 500 grams. They usually in between those two numbers when you buy them. And they, of course, come in different colors. This is for PLA. There's some specific filaments that come in different colors. Some come in like just one singular color. I believe resin. I'm not sure. Now we're going to talk about the extruder part component of the 3D printer. There are two different extruders. So one type is known as the Bowden, and this is where the top portion, or where the filament feeds into it, that with the gear is in the is mounted to the frame, and then there's this big pipe tube in which the filament gets feeded into all the way to the end right here, which is known as the extruder. So, uh, and then the second one is known as the direct drive extruder, and this is often mounted to the actual print head. So you have the extruder right here, the actual extruder where the filament gets extruded or gets taken out into the 3D printing object where it starts printing the layers, and it's all combined into one big jumbo right here, and the filament gets fed into the top. Don't worry about all these different labels. We'll get into them a little bit later. So here, I'm going to show you where everything is at the Ender 3, which I have. So does anyone want to take a guess at what kind of extruder this is? There's two choices. There's Bowden, and then there's
I would say Bowden because it looks like the filament's attached somewhere else.
yeah, that's true. This is known as a Bowden. You have this component right here, and you have this component right here. So how this works is, if you look on the left, you guys can see my pointer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have the filament that's coming in from here. It's getting fed into right here. This is like a gear in which the computer inside the 3D printer turns, and it um, pushes the filament from outside to inside this tube. And there's also a clamp here which holds this um, filament in place, even when this is not turning. And finally, the filament gets pushed into this tube right here until it gets extruded out here. In this extruder right here, it gets really heated enough to melt the plastic, melt the PLA onto the bed, which we'll discuss, onto the next layer that it'll be printing. And this right here is a cooling fan. So the um, heated material does not get too hot. Now I'm going to be discussing the filament holder. Some of these have filament holders, some don't. This is a filament holder right here. This was printed by me because when you, for the Ender 3s at least, when this filament is getting pushed through here, instead of it going straight from a 90-degree angle, um, we wanted to have the filament fed into it a very specific, not a 90-degree angle, so it'd be kind of clean and it won't break, because this filament is easily breakable. You can easily crack it like that. Now the next one, which I mentioned, is the bed. This is the base in which the object is built upon. So the first layer touches the bed, and then the second layer touches the next layer, and then so on and until you create the actual object. This is the Ender 3. As you can see, the bed is kind of a cardboard um, texture. Like, it does not bend and everything, and you have to use these clips on to hold it. In the Ender 3 Pro and the Ender 5 Pro, they have an elastic bed. So when you have the object on here, all you have to do is pull that up, pull the magnetic bed off, and you can easily bend it and take the object out. That's why I like the Ender 3 Pro and the Ender 5 Pro. So the next part is the print screen. You have a screen on the right, which is basically your control panel, where you can do lots of stuff. It has a UI interface. these in this screen, it often has some 3D printer control options. For example, prepare extruder. You can heat the extruder that's coming out. You can change the filament. And on the left side, down here, there's an SD card reader, which reads all of your G code files that you can print onto the 3D printer. So, how 3D printers work, how you go from start to finish, is you download STL files, or you create an STL file from the internet, and you translate it into G code using a Windows laptop. Using I use the Creality software that came with the Ender printers. And once you done that, you take out the SD card from your laptop and put it into the slot right here. Use on the left for Ender printers, and then you use this dial to select the option to read it from there. And when you hit enter, then it'll heat the bed. The bed gets heated up to like around 60 degrees Celsius, and then it heats to extruder up to like 200 degrees Celsius, and then it starts printing. It starts printing the XY axis and then the Z axis. So it prints the first layer, and then the second layer, and then the third layer, and then that's it. Those are all the parts of the 3D printer. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. And this is my works cited. Okay, if no one has any questions, I'm going to end the recording. Thank you for coming, and I hope to see you next week.